I am so excited to be with you, and I feel like I know you a little bit better today, and so excited about what God is doing in this place and in you. And I hope there were lots of conversations yesterday, and that those conversations will continue. And today, we're going to talk about one of my favorite stories, and it's in Luke chapter 8. If you want to follow along, you are welcome to. Otherwise, check it out later. You've probably heard this story. It's about a synagogue leader named Jairus, and he has a daughter who is dying. And he's kind of a bigwig in Jerusalem because he is a synagogue leader. So a lot of other people get caught up in this drama of him going to Jesus to ask Jesus if he will have mercy and heal his daughter. And of course, Jesus says yes. So he begins to follow Jairus back to his house. And there is a huge crowd following because they all want to see what Jesus is going to do. And he had attracted a lot of attention at this point. And then in the crowd, trying to be very, very incognito, was a woman. And she was a woman who had been ostracized by that same crowd for years, 12 years to be exact, because she had some internal bleeding happening. And whenever a woman had bleeding happening, she was considered unclean. And especially the religious people, the Pharisees, could not touch her. Nobody could be around her. And so she had heard about Jesus, and she was desperate at this point. She had been to every single doctor and person that could possibly help her, had taken every remedy that she knew of, and she was desperate. She was at the end of her rope. Maybe some of you have been there. And someone told her about Jesus and the healing that he was doing, and she thought to herself, maybe, just maybe, if I could get close enough to him, to touch him, just touch his cloak, maybe I'll be healed. And so this was her perfect opportunity because there was this giant crowd around Jesus. And she thought, surely nobody is going to notice me if I do this. So she slipped through the crowd and reached out and just touched his garment. And immediately she felt the bleeding stop. But then to her horror, Jesus stopped. Right there in the middle of the crowd. The crowd's in a hurry. Jairus is in a hurry. You can imagine this father desperate for his daughter. Wait a minute, Jesus, what are you doing? Why are you stopping? He stopped and he said, someone touched me. And of course his disciples go, Master, are you kidding me? Everybody's touching you. You're surrounded by people. And he goes, no. Someone touched me. I felt power go out from me. And so you can only imagine the terror of this woman. But before we continue the story, I want to make a point here about the way God works. Sometimes God interrupts you in your story because he wants you to be a part of someone else's story. Because we're here for more than us. Yes, God is so concerned about your life and what is going on in your life. And like we said yesterday, the storms that are happening in your life. But he's equally concerned with everybody around you right now. And the amazing thing about God is he can be particularly, totally concerned about you and everyone else. And the way he works, he's able to minister to so many people in so many ways, all at the same time. Jesus stopped in Jairus' story to attend to this woman. He had a plan for what he was going to do with Jairus, but he wanted to pay attention to this woman because he knew that part of her healing wasn't just about the bleeding. It was social. She had been ostracized. Nobody paid attention to her. And all of a sudden, the entire crowd is looking for her. But Jesus is looking for her, and he will not settle until she comes forward. When I was going through my period of extended singleness, as I told you yesterday, that went on a lot longer than I wanted, maybe some of you wonder, well, what did you do all that time? I mean, it was a long time before you got married. Well, I basically just sat on the couch and waited for the bachelor to show up with his rose. That's what I did. No. Here's the thing about life. You are just at the beginning of a lot of stages in life where you're going to wake up in the morning and go, God, this isn't exactly the way I want it to be. But you are calling me to live. You're calling me to live. Somehow, there's a reason for what's happening now. It's your timing. Maybe it's not my timing yet. And for sure, it wasn't my timing yet. I was going to have to wait a lot longer. But God began to stir in my heart. I know you want to be married. I kept praying, Lord, just bring me a husband, bring me a child, bring me a husband. I wanted all those things. All my friends had those things. It always feels like all your friends have everything you want, doesn't it? Especially on social media. And so I did pray those things, and I know God was hearing me, and he had a plan for that. But eventually I began to hear the Spirit of God say, you want a child? Well, if you're not hung up on the biology piece, I got a lot of kids out there who could use some mothering in their life. Are you willing to be flexible to the answer to your prayer? I wanted to volunteer during this time. I had just served as a youth pastor for 6 years in Berkeley, California. I'd moved to Orange County, and I thought about volunteering in a youth group, but God began to speak to me, you've been to the inner city with kids, and we would go on these weekend plunges where you'd go in, and maybe some of you have been into the inner city in areas that are poorer than where you are here. And I had been just for a day, an hour with my kids, kind of surmising the situation and doing what we could, but God began to say, you're only 45 minutes away from there right now. How about making that more of a regular thing? Maybe get involved there. And so I decided once a week I would go on Tuesdays and volunteer at an after-school program that I had heard of at a church that did a program called Say Yes, Save America's Youth Yes. Maybe some of you have heard of it. And it was an after-school program for kids who lived on the streets. And so I began to volunteer, and there was a girl. She was 11 years old when I met her, and she had just this brightest smile. And I asked about her, and it turns out she, unlike the other kids, lived with her father, who had fathered about 20 different kids, all with different women. She had only met her mom a couple of times. She was a drug addict on the street. I'm sitting there listening to myself with my prayer, and God began to nudge me. What about her? She could use maybe a little bit of mothering. And I don't know what you do when God starts speaking to you about things that feel a little bit scary, but I usually do the very spiritual act of arguing with God about why I can't do that particular thing. And it's never an external argument, it's always inside, right? And I said, Lord, what do we have in common? I don't even know what to say. And I felt the Spirit of God say, just love her. Just love her. So I went up to her and I said, you know what? How about if I come a little bit early on Tuesdays and I can pick you up from school and maybe we can just hang out together. I had no idea what we were going to do together, but of course she said, I'd love that. So that began a relationship that turned into a mentoring relationship between me and this girl. She lived in a hotel room. It's not like hotels where you and I stay with our families. These are hotels you wouldn't even want to be in by the way they look. There are people that urinate on the floor. There's drug paraphernalia everywhere. She lived in this room, but she wasn't on the streets. And she was proud because she had never been outside of Skid Row. And so we began to meet together. We did very simple things. I helped her learn how to wash her clothes and just little things. It was really about what God did in our relationship. And I began to ask the director if I could bring her down to my apartment to spend the night. And of course, those were her favorite nights. And so she became kind of a part of our family. She spent holidays with us. And when she was 15, she began to put on some weight. And at first I thought, no way, you never say anything to any woman about that. But she began to look like, I need to get you to a doctor. So I got her to a doctor, and she was 5 months pregnant and didn't even know it. That's how disconnected she was from her body. She had seen and been a part of such horrific things in her life. But what was interesting about this girl, and I write about her in the book, is that she made a decision that none of her friends made because of the relationship she had with me and the life she saw that was possible. She said, I want to give my baby up for adoption. And it was so brave of her because her dad really was not for that at all. And teenagers have babies all the time. And he wanted her to have the baby, and she said, no, I really want to find parents for my baby. So we poured through adoption books, and we found a couple. She picked a couple, and it was all set up. And then 3 weeks before the due date, the baby was born. So I'm tearing down the freeway on the way to the hospital to see this child, and I get a call from the social worker. The couple fell through because they wanted a girl. And this was a little boy. And I remember getting to the hospital and going into that room, and I saw her. She was asleep on the bed, and the baby was in the bassinet in that same room. And I just looked over this child, and I actually have a picture of the child, I believe, that you can see what I saw that day in the hospital. I think I do. There it is. Can you imagine? So precious. And I prayed over this child. I said, Lord, I know you have a plan for him, and she's going to take him if nothing happens. Well, I had a good friend who was living an opposite life from me. She had 4 kids, all of them in Christian school, and we were having dinner one night, and I was telling her about the situation. She said, that is so weird because there's this couple at our Christian school that we've been praying for 7 years, and they haven't been able to have a baby. And she works as a gym teacher, and he's a teacher of my 7th grade child, and they're married. And I said, well, do you think they'd be open to a phone call? She said, I have no idea. So we took it as a God thing, and I called them, and they decided they wanted to meet her. And so this next picture shows the picture of the two of them, and there's my girl. And with a high five and a yes, she decided that these 2 would be the parents of her baby. Of course, lawyers were brought in later, so it's all legit. But it's so interesting, you guys, because this baby was half Mexican, half African American, and Lisa is Puerto Rican, and Tim is Indian black. So that baby looks like it came right out of him. And they took this baby in, and it was the beginning of their adoption journey. They never had a biological child. They had 2 more adopted kids from inner city girls because their first, who was named Timothy, was so precious to them. They were this God family that got woven together, and we got connected just because I decided in my apartment that I would get up off the couch and start living my life. God wanted me to be involved in another story. And one of the great things, and it's pretty much the only great thing about growing old, is that you get to see how stories evolve. And you get to see what God does in time. And so last year, I received a picture of what this boy looks like right now. And you can see his parents behind him because he's signing a full ride scholarship to Vanguard University. His life was transformed because of her decision. I got to be a part of the story. I was the midwife that got to deliver the baby. And that's how you will feel when you decide to get involved in someone else's story. And some of you need to do that because you've been sitting in a story that's hard. And sometimes God heals us by getting involved in another story. I have no regrets about this. I am so grateful that I can look back on my single life and see some of the stories that God still used me in, even when He wasn't doing what I wanted in my own story. Looking back, we see so much more. Well, let's go back to Jairus. Imagine him. He's panicking at this point because Jesus not only heals this woman, but then He tells her to tell him her whole story. Have you ever been around two people where one of them is telling their whole story and you're so anxious? Can you imagine how he felt? My daughter's dying. And then, right in the middle of her story, someone comes up to Jairus and says, "Don't bother the teacher anymore. Your daughter is dead." You can only imagine how Jairus must felt. How could you bring me this far, Jesus? We were so close. And then we stopped and we were a part of this other story. And now I have no hope. And Jesus, when He hears that, immediately turns to Jairus and says, "Don't be afraid. Just believe." Believe? Believe in what? It's too late, Jesus. My daughter is dead. I have a quote from my book, and I love it so much. It's really short. It says this: "Too late is the timing God waits for to shine." It wasn't too late for Jesus. Oh yeah, it was too late for the healing miracle, but guess what? Jesus had in mind something bigger. He had in mind a resurrection. He gets to the house. The daughter is dead. There are already mourners there, and He tells the mourners to be quiet. He only takes two disciples with Him. And He goes up with Jairus and his wife, and He takes the daughter's hand, and He rises her from the dead. It's the first resurrection account that Jesus participates in. We think it's too late, don't we? When things don't happen when we want them to happen, we get so disappointed. God, it's too late for me. I'm in my late 40s. It's not going to happen anymore. Too late is the timing God waits for to shine. And here's the thing about God's timing. When things happen when they're supposed to happen, we celebrate. You guys, if I got married in my 20s, I wouldn't have even told you about it. It wouldn't be a story. When things happen when they're not supposed to happen, that's when we worship, because we see God in it. God is giving you a story if He's not doing what you want Him to do. Are you willing to let go of what you saw, what you wanted, and say, "God, I'm willing to participate in the bigger story that you have for me. You have a bigger plan in my life than just me." And that's what happened to me when I got married. I showed you that cute little picture yesterday of my husband and I and a little boy. Well, that boy, as you can imagine, is not that age anymore. And there have been so many things that have happened in his life because God brought Jerry and I together to raise him. Because it wasn't just about us raising him. I worked at a church, remember? That's how God set it up. I moved to Santa Barbara to work at a church. So we raised this boy in the community of a church. And there was this incredible youth pastor who came alongside of him, and he was mentored by people. And eventually, his junior year, in the middle of COVID. Now, we had walked through baptisms every year. A lot of our friends' kids were getting baptized, 8, 9, 10 years old. Jordan never said, no, it wasn't time. We were going to wait till it was time. Junior year, we're home, COVID. He goes, it's time. It's time. I want to get baptized. In the middle of COVID at the beach, when we were sitting like 6 feet apart from all the families, and we all had masks because we didn't know what we were doing at that point, he got baptized in the ocean. And from there, he started working with junior high kids. And he started becoming a part of our worship band. And what I want to do right now is give you something that you don't have right now. I want to give you a glimpse of a life. You have your lives in front of you. And you know, we exist in time, but God exists outside of time. So he knows everything that's going to happen to you all at once. I know that just blows your mind to think about. But Jerry and I started thinking, what if God showed us a glimpse of all that was going to happen in Jordan's life that day we got married? And we put together a minute-long video to show you what God can do. And there's only two things I want to tell you about this video before we start. And the first thing is that it's a time travel video, so you're going to have to watch the dates as it goes back and forth. And the second is the voice you hear singing is the voice of that little boy. So let's watch.
I'm safe with you, and I'm gonna make it through. Rain came, wind blew, but my house is built on you. And I'm safe with you, and I'm gonna make it through. Yeah, I'm gonna make it through. I'm standing tall on you. You're gonna make it through. 'Cause I'm standing tall on you. Christ is my firm foundation. He's the rock on which I stand. When everything around me is shaking, I'll never be more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause he's never let me down. He's faithful through generations, so I believe him now. He won't, he won't fail, he won't fail.
We have a big God, and he's at work, not just in you, but in everyone's life around you that he wants to touch. And the question this morning is, are you willing? Are you willing to live a bigger life? Are you willing to maybe step aside from your life and get involved in someone else's life who could really use you and your help? Are you willing to take the pain in your life that's perfectly matched to minister to somebody else's pain and be a part of their life? I will tell you guys that it was never my dream to live the life that I had. There was never a time that I said, Lord, I just pray I can get married at 49 and that I can have a child that has another mom. No, that was not my prayer. But it was God's dream for me to be a part of this family. And I am so grateful. And you will be too. But you have to say yes. Yes to living this bigger life. And that's what we're going to invite you to do this morning. We're going to have a time of response. I'm going to have the band come up and play a song. And if you feel like you want to say to God, yeah, I am willing to live a bigger life. Lord, if you show me. Let me pray. Lord, I know that part of our healing in our own life is to get involved in other people's lives. It's mysterious how that happens, but I pray for that to happen all over this campus. I just pray not only for revival in people's hearts, but for revival in people's relationships. that people will have their eyes open to each other and have compassion and reach out, that you would show us the places that you want us to get involved in. And I pray for these students, that they would say yes to the life that you have for them. Because you don't fight our will, but when we say yes, you open the doors. If we open our eyes. Help us open our eyes. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.